Our next speaker is Jens Tuider, who is a philosopher from Germany. Jens studied at the University of Mannheim, where his professor was Ursula Wolf, one of Germany's foremost animal ethicists. At the moment, he is working on the translation of his award-winning essay, Is It Permissible to Eat Animals?, and is translating the website of Melanie Joy's organization. In this workshop, we will focus on the role that philosophy plays in the animal rights movement by finding good and valid arguments for our cause. Jens will do a short presentation, and afterwards we want to do a very interactive workshop. So please work a bit with us and do your best.
Thanks a lot. Can you hear me all right? Is that okay? Microphone? Okay, good. Okay. Okay, thanks. Yeah, welcome to the Animal Rights Arguments Workshop. My name is Jens. I would like to thank you all for coming, and I would also like to thank the organizers for making things possible. I feel they're doing an incredibly good job, and thanks for having me. I have to admit this is the first time I've given this workshop, so it's a bit of an experiment. It's also a bit of a premiere for me, so bear with me if I have to stick to the manuscript sometimes, and yeah. Let me give you a brief introduction into what I feel we should be doing today before we get started with addressing some of the most commonly used standard critical arguments against animal rights. But before I do that, I would like to make a terminological remark. As this is the Animal Rights Workshop, I need to say a few words about that term. I'll be using the term animal rights in its broadest possible sense, including its abolitionists and protectionist strands, as well as all the other variations that exist. And I'll be setting it apart from traditional animal welfare. The arguments I've collected so far do not presuppose any kind of, or do not presuppose a specific animal rights position within this spectrum. I'm well aware of the fact that some people, especially in the feminist and post-colonial camp, are not exactly happy with the term rights for various reasons, because usually they associate it with some kind of liberal tradition, notions like social atomism and so on. So should anyone take issue with that use of that term, please feel free to replace it by any synonymous term you feel fit and proper, like animal liberation, animal advocacy, veganism, which I consider to be more or less synonymous. This workshop is about looking into and analyzing the most commonly used skeptical arguments against animal rights and identifying and collecting the most plausible counter-arguments or rebuttals to defend animal rights. These arguments can be roughly divided into two major categories. That is empirical, and the other one is normative, or as you can say, ethical or moral. The main focus of this workshop will be on the normative aspect, on the moral arguments, on the ethical arguments, even though, of course, some empirical aspects always play into that. And as you might have already guessed, the normative arguments are more difficult, they're more tricky, because empirical facts can easily be proven. So you can run experiments, you can use the data you get from this to collect, or you can collect data and infer from this some kind of answer to the question you've posed originally, so you can try to figure out, do human beings really need animal products to live a healthy life? That is an empirical question. And usually science does the trick to give you the answers to that. This is not possible in ethics. You can't run any kinds of experiments or any kinds of empirical investigation which gives you an answer to these questions. So ethical questions are notoriously difficult to answer. Thank you. I also need to stress that this workshop focuses exclusively on the content of the arguments, but not on the psychological aspects of argumentation or on communication strategies. I'll be coming back to this in a moment. This workshop aims at providing those speaking out for animals with sound arguments. It is designed to familiarize participants with the standard objections to animal rights and the most common defenses of established practices. So it addresses both those who are new to this discourse as well as those who might already call themselves experts. I'm afraid most of you are experts, so probably you're not really need to know too much about this, but also I'm very much interested in what you have to contribute, and I would like to get probably some new rebuttals, some new counter-arguments, some new insights, and some new analysis of some of the standard arguments. So the idea is to share and exchange, discuss and scrutinize these arguments. And it's exactly these kinds of arguments that drive Gary Francione crazy. I don't know if some of you have just been to the presentation. There were some questions afterwards. And, you know, people have these sophisticated questions about all kinds of what if that, or does the lion have morality, and all these kinds of things. I disagree with Gary here, because I think these kinds of questions need to be answered, because people who ask them probably want them answered, not always, but probably. And you just can't tell them, well, this is something I don't discuss. I think we should take these questions seriously. So the motto of the workshop could be nicely expressed in a phrase by the philosopher Daniel Dennett. There's nothing I like less than bad arguments for a view I hold dear. At least that used to be my motto in the past. I'm afraid, though, matters are not as simple as that, because there are almost all arguments out there against animal rights are not arguments, but they are in fact rationalizations and defenses. I feel that this fact has long been underestimated, because humans like to conceive of themselves as rational creatures. They hope that rational discourse is going to solve controversial matters once and for all. This at least used to be my conviction. But I then rather painfully realized that rational discourse alone just didn't do the trick of winning people over to the cause of animal rights. Skeptics of animal rights don't use their arguments simply because they incidentally believe in certain wrong facts. More often, their arguments are supposed to work as rationalizations and defenses of habits they've grown to like. And therefore, these arguments are not motivated by a different view about the, let's say, ontological status of animals, but are in fact part of a psychological strategy. Whether they are aware of these strategies or not is irrelevant. This insight has consequences for the project of rational discourse, which Carol J. Adams has aptly phrased. Two kinds of people exist in the world: those who want answers to their questions and those who don't. More important than knowing the answers to questions is having the skill to tell the difference between these people. Very often, the skeptical argument or the skeptical question, you can replace question with arguments here, I guess, doesn't need to be answered. What sometimes is more important is to identify what Adams calls the question behind the question. And Adams continues, she goes on, questions reveal a great deal more than most of us realize. Listen to their questions, not to answer them, but as explanations, unquote. So should we give up rational discourse and argumentation? Well, no, of course not. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I even think we couldn't, even if we tried. Instead, I've come to the conclusion that it takes a more comprehensive approach to win people over to the cause of animal rights, which contains, besides sound arguments, also insights into the psychological mechanisms at work when people are skeptical of animal rights, as well as communicative strategies. For example, the narrative strategy, where you try to relate your story and your own experience of transformation rather than assail your interlocutors with facts and arguments. So rather not conceive of it as a kind of battle you have to win. Moreover, most people do not take kindly to the idea of being lectured on moral issues. Consequently, presenting arguments requires a certain amount of care and sensitivity in order not to intimidate interlocutors by wrongly giving the impression of taking the moral high ground. Therefore, I consider these two mottos as rather complementary than mutually exclusive. I still believe that rational arguments can play an important part in our struggle for animal rights. I still believe that whenever you have to fall back on to arguments, you had better make sure they are sound. And this is where philosophy can make a significant contribution to the practical work of animal rights activists and advocates. I'm just making these precautionary remarks in order to put things into perspective and to avoid raising wrong expectations that cannot be met, because rational argumentation, rather unfortunately, to my mind, cannot work miracles. Okay. Finally, this workshop also strives to contribute to a comprehensive argument database. And a first step towards this end, relevant contributions from this workshop will be collected and included in a systematically structured compilation. You might wonder whether there is really any need to have a new compilation of arguments, as there are quite a few collections available out there on the web in pamphlets or sorts of media. I do believe this is an important project because many collections of arguments are either non-systematic or based on problematic premises and unclear assumptions, or they are excessively preachy or rife with polemic or disrespectful language. I had this phrase in a collection somewhere online where somebody wrote, you will understand these arguments if you've got a functioning brain or something like that. I don't know if that's really helpful because it probably will deter exactly those people we need to address. Right. So I think we can get started. I think we'll, oh, by the way, should anyone like to receive a copy of the arguments compiled here today, take a note of this email address and send me an email. Put in the subject line IARC if possible, something which is closely related. I'll promise you I'll reply instantly, but it will take a couple of, I won't say what exactly, it will take some time before I can provide you with the entire copy of that. I'll make sure you send an email. It's better than passing around lists because I'm very bad at identifying hieroglyphic handwriting. Okay, good. So I suggest we get started. And I thought I'll just show the skeptical arguments to you, and I will be collecting your spontaneous, intuitive responses to that. I guess if you are vegans or animal rights activists or advocates or whatever, you might have come across these questions loads of times. So maybe some of you have already had these kinds of experiences and already probably had the right answer to them. Good. Any questions before we get started? Nobody wants to leave? Not yet? Excellent. Okay. Argument number one. I think it makes a fine start because it is a very basic argument. There are more important things in the world than animal rights. So why bother about animal rights as long as there are children starving, as long as there are wars going on, atrocities around the globe, horrible diseases haunting mankind? That is usually combined with the charge of misanthropy. Right? People who care about animals, animal rights, they don't like people. Right? They think animal issues are much more important than people issues. So why should we care about animal rights? Aren't there more important things? Shoot.
Because once we acknowledge animals are beings and should be regarded as sentient beings and put on the same place with humans, there are the largest number of beings that die every year, more than all the wars, all the natural catastrophes and things like that. So the animal food industry is provoking the biggest number of deaths every year.
Okay, so that's an argument from numbers. Just it's a sheer numbers
that
make lots of sense to include the animals into consideration, because we could save lots of animals from pain, suffering.
But first we should acknowledge that animal lives, it's no less important than a human life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, thanks. That's a good point. Any more ideas? It will be tough for you bringing the microphone around all day today. Sorry for that. Could you speak up? I'm not getting you. Yeah, there's another argument you're making. Yeah, thanks for contributing. Okay, excellent. So that's another one. It was number 2, right? So they're all interconnected. That's what you're saying. So we can't separate these things. That's one of the basic mistakes. Excellent. Right.
Yeah. We must use the term veganism instead of animal rights, I think.
Okay.
Veganism is actually the one that also helps humans.
Okay, could you expand on this? Why is it better to speak about veganism instead of...
Like the children and the population in West Africa, on the Atlantic shores, that depend on fishing, and we actually exterminated most of the fish in the oceans and so on. So veganism actually helps them to live and so on. And then there's the use of people like in slave labor, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we fight against that also because most of their work contributes to animal exploitation and so on. So, but for that I think we must use the term vegan. Why are you vegan? Not why do you fight for animal rights.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a...
The food used to feed the whole animal industry could eradicate the hunger in the world.
Okay, good. That's the interconnection aspect you've already mentioned. Okay, thanks. You're holding microphones. Sorry for keeping you waiting. So
usually at this question, I respond that animal rights and human rights are linked. I mean, it's question of liberty, of individuality, of the possibility of a family, because everybody wants to have to be free and to have liberty. Yes. Yeah, so I make the link between us and the animal, and I say they are like us. They want the same thing that we want. We want liberty. We want to be saved. We want to have children, and also like this.
So you can say we can not have any
I make the link between,
priorities here. So they're all on equal levels. It's difficult to put them into a hierarchy where you say this comes first. So because these people probably don't say we shouldn't care about animals. They just, what they're trying to say is, at least basically, is humans come first, human issues come first, and as soon as we've settled all these issues, we can turn to the animals, right? They don't reject animal issues. They just try to place them rather in the background, right? Probably
when there is some good things for animals, it's good for the people too. Right. There is links.
So I guess the interconnection aspect is very strong here. Okay, good. Any more contributions? Yes, please.
Robert Spemann says to this point, this would be the end of every culture when we only...
we hierarchize the issues?
When we Probleme lösen. If you solve the highest problems first, and then the next, and then the next, and this would then there would be no culture.
Okay.
No other interests.
So you argue against the urgency principle. So urgency, the most urgent things only. So forget about all the other issues. If it's not the most urgent one, we can get it out of our minds. Okay, good, excellent. That is so much more than I had expected. I thought I would have go through this like a presentation, but it was incredible reactions.
Okay, wasn't long enough. I would start answering to that statement with a quote from Leo Tolstoy, which says, as long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields, which means that the treatment of animals automatically defines the treatment of humans.
Excellent. So that's again the interconnection aspect. Okay, good. Yes, please.
I think people in the back have to shout or come.
Eve is tired already, right? Very good.
If you're involved in animal rights, you're probably a compassionate person and you're open to finding other social injustices, whether it's whatever kind of practice, if it's human or animal, doesn't have to be one of the...
Right, and many social reformers set the example for that, right? Henry Salt, for example, and others, they campaigned not only for one issue, they were also... Yeah, probably. Or for women's rights or whatever. Exactly. So it's not mutually exclusive. It is more like a general disposition you have, and therefore you're more sensitive to these kinds of things. Right, that was completely simultaneously. I don't know who was first. I would have needed to bring only this argument, I think. They would have done the whole workshop. Excellent.
Yes, I regularly do demonstrations and campaign stalls and talks to people, and I get asked this question a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why do you concentrate more on animals than people? And my answer is, well, what are you doing for... You're obviously concerned about me not putting people first. What are you doing for people? And the answer is, well, I'll never really get an answer.
Not a lot. Yeah.
And I say some people prefer to do things for humans. Fine, don't knock that one bit. But I, as an individual, prefer to do things for animals. But when you do something for human beings, contact me and I'll see if I've got some time to help you. Of course, I never hear from them because they're doing absolutely zero.
All right. Okay, very good. Excellent.
I just wanted to point out that most of the arguments that were brought up now, they're good arguments, they work when you talk to people, but from an ethical point of view, they are not really good arguments. The only good argument from an ethical point of view is that we're talking about basic rights and there's no hierarchy of basic rights. Basic rights are basic rights and they all have the same importance. All the other arguments are, if you meet someone who's very smart about these arguments and has maybe a philosophical background, then he will take you apart on these arguments.
Definitely, yes. The problem is they try to create a kind of dilemma, right? They try to show you this is a case of emergency, we can only choose between two options. And in these cases, usually we have an intuition that maybe sometimes people might be more relevant. So it's a classic your child or your dog dilemma. Who would you say? Well, most mothers would save their child, hopefully. Right, definitely. But these situations never occur in normal life. But they can be used to rationalize these kinds of decisions, absolutely. And this is one of the more sophisticated versions of that. They try to create a dilemma where there is no dilemma, in fact.
I'm not sure if it's correct what you said, because we demand basic rights for non-human animals, and so it's not equally to demand basic rights for everyone. This is a single issue demand. We ask especially for those who don't have basic rights. Humans have basic rights yet in our Western society, but we can argument in a different way, not asking or demanding basic rights. We can say from the other side that we are protesting and acting against domination and under pressing and exploitation. Yes, and so this is a structure in our society that is not only
Accepted?
No. It's not only figured on non-human animals, or it's not only not human animals that are victims of this structure in our society, of the system. So we fight against a bigger thing, not only for basic rights for non-human animals, but we try to attack these structures in our society that also harm human animals.
Right, so it's a structural problem?
It's the animal liberation also ideology that we say we should not harm anyone or discriminate anyone, or so this is in a greater context of other discrimination forms.
Okay, so that's the intersectionality aspect as well. Okay, good. All right, excellent. Go on.
Related to some things that have been said, some arguments about the intersection of animal rights and human rights. There is a recent psychological study, if you're interested in it, that says that there is some kind of a causal link from speciesism to racism. The background of that study was the idea that the Holocaust could only be possible if you look at Jews and think they are only animals. And so scientists tested this hypothesis. If you're a speciesist and you degrade animals, how likely is it that you're open for racist opinions? And they showed that there's kind of a causal link in there. So fighting speciesism makes it harder for racists.
Very good. Yeah, I think social psychologists did lots of good work in this area, especially the language also being used. You talk about vermin, you kind of animalize these people before they get slaughtered in a genocide, for example. These are well-documented processes. Right, shall we go on to the next one? Probably, I'll show you what answers I came up with, but it's probably exactly what you've suggested. I'm really impressed. It wrongly creates a dilemmatic situation between two competing worthy causes, which is in fact not true. If we apply the principle of urgency consistently, it would have dramatic and counterintuitive consequences. I think that is something what you said, right? So imagine doctors were only allowed to treat those most urgent cases and forget about all the others. Or if you say, well, people who campaign for abused children should stop that immediately because there are children starving, which might be an even bigger problem. So facing on the most urgent thing has counterintuitive consequences. This argument is also speciesist, I think, as in fact the logic of the argument is only applied when one of the competing causes is related to animals. People would never make this charge against people, or against activists who are committed to human causes. So if there's somebody working for the welfare of children, would never be accused of not working for the elderly, right? That would never happen. But if you work for animals, that's a different matter. So only if one of the two horns of the dilemma is related to animals, this becomes an issue, okay? It also overlooks the distinction between positive and negative duties, and the fact that supporting animal rights only requires refraining from certain actions, right? People usually are not, most people say you have to take animals into consideration, don't want others to become advocates in the sense of activists to go out on the streets. All you need to do is stop doing certain things, like you stop doing instead of doing them. So that's what we call a negative duty, and usually negative duties are considered to be stronger than positive ones, even though this might be a matter of controversy. Even if active animal rights advocacy does take up time and energy, so that is when you just don't refrain from eating them, but also become active, there are crucial differences to most other causes that nevertheless justifies working for animal rights, I guess. That is the lack of public awareness, it's a lack of moral consensus, and at least the indirect involvement of large parts of the population. So the awareness is missing here, right? You don't need to tell people abusing children is wrong. You say, yeah, I know that, thanks, it's no news, right? Whereas if it comes to animals, to some people that is still news. There's no consensus that we can say, yeah, it's so horrible, we should stop this, and we should condemn this straight away. And moreover, not all people are involved directly or indirectly in many of the other problems or social issues, as is the case with animal rights. Right. Any last words? Shall we say goodbye to argument number 1? Right. Oh, I've got one. The most important one. Shame on me. Okay, many aspects of human and animal welfare are interconnected. Charges of animal preferentialism and misanthropy are unfounded. That's the point many of you made, and I think is one of the most important ones. Exactly. So whoever is very critical of animal issues, you could still tell them, well, I'm also doing something for human beings. I'm not an animal lover or a rabbit hugger or whatever. Good. That's a simple one. It's a no-brainer, as we say. Animals don't suffer. They experience neither physical pain nor emotional distress. Therefore, we can treat them as we please. Wouldn't that be simple? So, it's a lie. It's an outright lie, you say. It's false. Okay. Why? Can you expand on this? Why is it a lie? Or how can you prove that? Because one of the problems definitely is we're touching on the problem of other minds here, right? You never know how it feels for somebody else to be that being. I don't even know how it feels for you to feel pain, right? I know how it feels for me if I stick a needle into my hand, but I don't know how it feels for you if you do the same if I do it to you. So that's a strong point where people can say, yeah, but we don't know. We can't be animals. Nobody of us is an animal, so how do we know? But of course, there's a solution. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so could you quote some of these discoveries? Probably, what exactly did they discover, or what reasons do we have to assume that? I know it's a perfectly stupid question, right? We can all agree on that, but sometimes people ask these questions.
The obvious answer is that parts of animals have a central nervous system.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Absolutely.
I would also say that since all the animals are trying to take any kind of action to avoid pain, it's a pretty good indicator that they feel pain.
There must be some reason for that, right? Excellent. Good. More.
I ask people if they have pets at home, and invariably, yes, I have a dog or cats, and do you love them? Of course I do. And do you think they love you? Of course they do. And if you stand on your dog's paw or your cat's paw, what's its reaction? Well, it cries out. Why? Well, it obviously hurts, so they feel pain. Well, how can you say that cats and dogs and domestic animals do feel pain, yet other animals don't? And it stops them dead in their tracks, because there's obviously no answer.
That would be an outright inconsistency to say that. Yeah, thanks.
I would just say that there obviously is a social consensus that animals are able to feel pain because we have animal welfare laws. I mean, they disrespect animal rights, but obviously most people think that animals are able to feel pain, otherwise there wouldn't be any legislation trying to avoid pain.
Wouldn't make much sense, would it? Yeah. Exactly.
My argument would be that we have to apply the argument of analogy consistently. So the people who raise this argument, they don't apply it consistently. They believe that their children and their babies are sentient. What else did I want to say? There's also a psychological study on this. What about livestock farmers? They did an experiment on this. Are they able to distinguish emotions of pigs and so on? And yeah, livestock farmers are really good in seeing emotions if a pig is angry or afraid or so. We vegans, we are good in it, but also livestock farmers are good in it. Now, there was one difference. You have primary emotions like pain, fear, distress. And then you have higher or secondary emotions, which are typically ascribed to humans, like guilt and so on, shame, and things like this. And the study also says that regarding secondary emotions, vegans, animal rights activists are consistently ascribing these emotions to animals, for example, to dogs. And the meat eaters, they do it inconsistently. They ascribe it, for example, to dogs, to their pets, but not to the pigs and so on. So the meat eaters, they have a consistency in their empathy, in their, but it applies to secondary emotions. When it comes to primary emotions, they look at pictures and they can really say, afraid, happy. You can really test it with young children. Everyone except psychopaths are really able to really quickly say if the animal is hurt or is happy.
Excellent. So, okay. Would you like to have a last word on this one? Okay. Yes, please.
I want to say something about this distinction between primary emotion and secondary emotion. This distinction originates from social psychology, and it's only mean that people think that there are differences and that animals experience only primary emotions. This is not consensus in ethology and neuroscience. So this is very important.
Okay. Critical remarks, thanks a lot. Okay, I'll show you what I have. That's basically what you've already mentioned. It's a similarity of animals' behavior in similar situations. It's a similarity of animals' nervous systems, of course, and the evolutionary usefulness of pain and fear. And last but not least, whether we like it or not, painkillers and anxiolytic drugs are developed in animal experiments. Why are they tested there, right? Or all science would be basically completely misled in their basic assumptions. All right, good. But I like the thing about the welfare law. It was good. All right. The next one. Animals do suffer, so they admit this, but because of their cognitive inferiority, their suffering is less intense than that of humans. Therefore, their suffering matters less. Therefore, we can treat them in ways that wouldn't be acceptable for humans.
Well, I would like to say this. If I go to the dentist, he hurts me, and I know why he hurts me, and so it makes it a lot more valuable to know if the pain will go away, but the animal never does. So I would argue that the dentist operating on the animal is much more painful than it is on man.
All right, so you just reverse that. You just say it's just the opposite way. So the cognitive abilities do not point towards higher suffering, more intense suffering, but just to the opposite. Right? Anyone who's ever taken their pets to the vet knows exactly what this is about. I know I can't even get my 2 cats to go to the vet in any circumstances. The vet has to come to our place, in fact, otherwise it wouldn't work. And it reduces their stress. Okay, any more?
Yeah, me again. If I hear this remark, then I would say, look, I am a foster parent of a mentally disabled Vietnamese child. My sister works in an institution of mentally disabled. Their cognitive skills are as high as those of, or even lower than those of pigs and dogs and chickens. Mm-hmm. So from that criteria, that's called the argument of marginal cases, but that's a bit disrespectful. The argument of atypical humans. Mm-hmm.
Or human non-persons, you could say that.
Human non-self-conscious, non-rational persons. And we all agree that also these marginal cases, they have basic rights. And it's really horrifying if you would say, like, okay, then we use those mentally disabled humans. I have never met someone who says, like, okay, even Peter Singer, people like that, they are really struggling with this argument. They are attacked by it, and they are struggling. Like, they know there's a huge disgust with people if they think about this.
Not if they voice their thoughts, probably only. Yeah. Okay, good. Any more comments on this one? Shall we get on? Yes, please. Would you like to shout or use the microphone?
I'll shout. I sometimes find it efficient to compare animals to human beings, especially with people who are parents. So you like tell them, like, remember when your kid was a baby? Yes. He was cognitively impaired, so, he couldn't speak, could he? No. He couldn't eat his own food, could he? No. He caused more damage to the house than your dog. Yes. Did you still love him? I mean, you still consider him to be a being worth loving and protecting? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right, so that is basically the same direction. You say you don't have to have these sophisticated cognitive abilities in order to have full status. Yeah, I think this is an important argument insofar as it shows one of the most dramatic fallacies in this whole animal rights, animal ethics discourse, because people think just because there are some capacities or some things that, or some abilities that some beings don't have, they fall into a different kind of category. And this category is inferior, not only inferior in dilemmatic situations, but in general. And this inferiority makes it possible for us to instrumentalize them, use them to our purposes. Right, I'll show you what I had, roughly what you also covered. The assumption that suffering is correlated with cognitive abilities of a being holds true only for emotional suffering. I think that's partly what you said. Certainly wrong with regard to physical pain. Right? No matter how much you can reflect on that, if you stick a needle into your finger, it will just hurt, no matter how cognitively sophisticated you are. It's part maybe from these guys who can do yoga and stuff like that. Correlation between cognitive abilities and emotional suffering does not always point toward lesser suffering. That's what you said on the part of the cognitively less sophisticated beings, because sometimes we don't, or these beings don't understand the context, so the suffering could be intensified. Even if animals always suffered less due to their cognitive inferiority, it does not follow that we can treat them in ways that wouldn't be acceptable for humans. And as what you've already said, if we accepted a principle of general moral discounting based on cognitive inferiority, this would also affect the marginal cases, the human non-persons, like very small children, mentally disabled, the senile, and so on. Right, okay. Animals can't have rights because they don't respect our rights, or because they can't have duties or obligations. Why should we respect rights of people or of beings who don't do it likewise? Isn't that stupid? Right, but what do you do if you go swimming in the ocean, there's a shark coming? He does make no distinction whether you're an animal rights activist or some shark hater who shoots sharks and cuts off their fins just for fun. He's going to bite you probably, not to eat you, but probably to bite you. Right, yeah. Can't blame you, yeah. Right, okay, good. Any more on this? Yes, please. Right. So it doesn't.
I think you can use the same arguments with the babies and the
human non-persons. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think that is a basic thing, because these are beings that also have or are not able to fulfill duties and obligations. Still, we assign rights to them. Probably not all rights, as Gary Francione also said. It doesn't make a lot of sense to assign the right to drive a car to a baby or to a cognitively disabled human being, but the basic rights, rights to life, rights to liberty, and so on. Yes, very good. I think that's basically it. This whole thing is based on a view which is called reciprocity, and which confuses self-interest with ethics. It's very popular in contractualism and contractarianism. Even if reciprocity plays some part in ethics, it certainly can't be the last word, as it excludes not only humans but also human non-persons. That's what you said. Having rights is not conditional on being capable of having duties or obligations. The case of human non-persons shows the possibility of an asymmetry between rights and duties. Right, domesticated animals owe their existence to us. We brought them into existence. Therefore, we are justified to deal them as we please. We benefited them. They wouldn't be alive if we didn't bring them into existence. That's a very old one. I found it in Henry Salt's collection of arguments written in the 1870s, 1880s. People already had this argument. Sorry. Why is it flawed?
You'll be surprised, but I would add something to this, because I heard people saying that they wouldn't even exist if you wouldn't exploit them.
Yeah, they would disappear.
They would disappear.
That is partly, you could even put it in drastic words. Yeah, they benefit. They should be grateful we exploit them, because that is why they are in existence in the first place. Right, is that... Absolutely, yeah. It should be awarded for cruelty, because it's a basis for existence. All right, okay. Does it make a lot of sense? Hopefully not.
Well, this is a very, very, very tricky philosophical thing. If you look at population ethics, you get in all kind of trouble. The easiest reply for me, I think, is there was once a time that we tried breeding slaves, black people as slaves. So you can say, suppose we do it, you breed a black person, use him as a slave, and you can say, okay, slavery did not exist, you did not exist, would you like it? And so, yeah, then it's easy how you can intuitively see that there's something wrong with the argument, but actually much more needs to be said because this is a really tricky thing.
Absolutely. Okay, I'll show you what I have. The assumption that any life, regardless of its quality, is always better than non-existence. I think that is certainly false. As the examples of suicides, for example, show, right? People wouldn't commit suicide if life or if existence were always better than than non-existence. The quality of life of most domesticated animals in factory farms is certainly very low, and even if the quality of life of domesticated animals in factory farms were sufficiently high for them to choose life over non-existence, it does not follow that we may make them suffer and take their lives in return for benefiting them. Bringing a being into existence doesn't give one free rein over it, but implies an obligation to care. And that's another very important point. If you have children, you bring them into existence. But it doesn't give you the right to do whatever you like just because you did that, right?
It is very likely that we owe our existence to an equation that we call it 1 is related to 1. You can calculate the probability that our existence depends on the rate. Is it far?
Okay.
So that's actually the same now. Does this say that we are pro rate now because
Better not. Okay, thanks. What about timing? Are we running out of time?
We are running out of time. We have 3 minutes left, but I hear room C is free. If we can continue there.
Okay, then we'll have to call it a day here. Thanks for your participation. It was fantastic. I'm overwhelmed. Thank you.